This is Reaganism, a podcast dedicated to exploring where the Reagan movement lives today. I'm Roger Zakheim, your host, director of the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C.
On this episode of Reaganism, Roger sits down with the 28th governor of the state of Oklahoma, J. Kevin Stitt. They discuss Governor Stitt's administrative priorities in Oklahoma, his leadership position as policy chair within the Republican Governors Association, the pressing national security issues like Ukraine and Israel, and what lessons Republicans can learn from President Reagan's leadership.
Governor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you.
Well, remarkable background, business background coming in and running statewide, becoming governor of Oklahoma. You know, one of the things that really seems to line up with your biography and the motto of the state is, I understand that the state motto in Oklahoma is labor conquers all things. What's Governor Stitt's riff on that state motto?
Well, you know, number one, we love that motto, and it's so true. And I tell people, a working man has nothing to worry about. If you're a hard worker, if you do a good job, people are you're gonna have plenty of opportunities. So it starts with hard work, and that's kind of the ethos of the Oklahoma person. Just very hardworking, entrepreneurial, very loyal, kind of rural, farming type background in our culture. And that's just kind of who we are as Oklahomans. We'll outwork you.
So we had a chance to chat a little bit before we recorded this conversation. And we're talking about the speech President Reagan gave in March of 1982. He came to the state capitol and in Oklahoma, and he had this line. He goes, why is it the population at the time of only 3 million people? I believe Oklahoma is now around 4 million, maybe more. Okay, 4 million. You develop such great football teams. And that was his question, and it got a good response in the legislature. He was always one to begin with a bit of humor, but then he went to the motto, and he went to the culture of work and the history of going in and overcoming challenges, whether it be being the Sooners or dealing with challenges of, he referenced floods and drought. You make good of what you got and you realize prosperity. Is that your explanation why Oklahoma has such great football teams?
We do have good football teams, but like President Reagan believed in, the American dream is alive and well in Oklahoma. It's really the land of the opportunity, and people. That's why we're top 10 right now in people moving to Oklahoma. Because we believe in limited government and the free markets, and there's no such thing as equal outcomes, but we want equal opportunities for everyone. And that's why I think people are such hard workers in Oklahoma. And then the University of Oklahoma, with I think 6 national championships, great history. I went to Oklahoma State, not quite as many national championships for our football team, but we claimed one back in like 45. So.
And you have some standouts, right? Barry Sanders. So, you got your own legacy to reference, right?
Barry Sanders, greatest running back of all time, Oklahoma State, baby.
All of a sudden, we found agreement between the state of Michigan and the state of Oklahoma right there. I'm not sure you'd find more, but Barry Sanders would be that commonality for sure. Governor, you left a very successful business to enter public life. You're talking about creating, opportunity and a great place to do business, and people are moving to Oklahoma. You've been governor for some time. Being in public office, how challenging is it to make all the different interest groups understand that, hey, we need less government interference? We need to have government organized in such a fashion that we're creating the opportunity, not getting in the way of it. I don't know if there's something top of mind that you can reference, but is that the sort of thing that when you entered your position after your inauguration, you felt people understood, or it required an education?
Well, it's a very interesting question. And I think first off, our founders of our country, I don't think they thought that politics was going to be this climb the ladder profession. They thought you'd be a successful business person or farmer or rancher or teacher, and you'd go leave that to go serve your country or your state. That's exactly the way I approach this. And I think that's what we need in leaders, is to come in and do the right things for the right reasons, be successful in the private sector, and come in, because too often our politicians are too worried about who's funding them and what type of job they're going to get after politics, or what office they're going to run for next. And so the decisions they make are always clouded by some kind of future ambition. And I always tell people, where's the courage? Where is the doing the right things for the right reasons? And that's why I think American people are so frustrated with politicians, because they can see right through them and the decisions don't make sense. And obviously, government's not the answer. I mean, we know that. We know we need to get government out of the way and let free market and let the innovation. Take President Biden, and they're putting their thumb on the scale of energy, and they're trying to stamp out and trying to say we ought to do this instead of that, instead of just letting the free market meet the needs of Americans. And we could talk about that all day long, but that's a perfect example of how government intervention is really causing inflation. It's causing everything to cost more at the pump, which is harming American people.
Well, I want to get to energy in a minute, but one of the core responsibilities that certainly the federal level, but also governors have a role too, is security, right? And border security is one I want to go to. As governor, that is, you're responsible for the National Guard in your state, border Texas and other, where you get all the headlines and focus in terms of you have the migration flows, the illegal crossings into Texas. How much has that impacted Oklahoma? Certainly, the congressional delegation coming from Oklahoma has been front and center with Senator Langford trying to come up with a bill, and that was not successful. In fact, that was mostly a function of Republicans saying not the time. President Trump famously saying he wanted to wait on that until he was reelected president. But for you, day to day in the job, the border, is that impacting you? Is that top of mind? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, well, first off, Oklahoma stands with Texas. I've been to the border several times with Governor Abbott. It's practically in Oklahoma, our fentanyl deaths are up 500% since I took office in 2019. So we know there's some bad people coming through the southern border. And we know President Biden has the tools he needs to actually secure the border and go back to Trump-era policies, which is really just remain in Mexico. So the other thing that I like to make sure we differentiate is it is absolute common sense to have a secure border and know who's coming through. At the same time, we need immigration reform. We need to understand, and we need more workforce. And so I'm a proponent as governor to say that H-1B visas need to be controlled at the state level instead of the federal level. So in other words, doesn't it make sense that the companies and the manufacturings and the agriculture community would come to the governor and say, hey, I need 1,000 workers? Or our engineering companies would say, hey, we need to keep these people in the engineering colleges that are coming in from India or Europe and studying our universities. We want to be able to give them a visa to then, work in our economy. So in other words, but again, immigration policy reform is totally different than secure border. And just makes no sense to the American people how you are cutting razor wire, letting people come through. It's already illegal to enter anywhere except the 28 ports of entry along the Texas-Mexico border. And so it's a head scratcher for us in Oklahoma, and I know us nationally.
I want to go into a few things you said. They're super interesting. It's pretty clear that the authorities are in place to secure the border. If the President of the United States wants to do it, it's been a deliberate policy choice on his part. Although my own view is a missed opportunity not to take advantage of that Langford bill because, it seems to put points on the board for those who care about border security in a fashion that we haven't had in the past. But, that, as they say, is behind us, and we'll see what happens in the upcoming presidential election. Your point about giving governors the opportunity to really weigh in on B-1 visas and address some of the workforce shortage issues, that's fascinating and important. I mean, on the one hand, we have all this illegal immigration. We got to secure our borders. It's a national security threat. On the other hand, we need more workers in this country. We're basically at effective unemployment, and hearing from you and other governors I've spoken with, we need a larger workforce. Is that getting any traction? Are other governors, other states interested in having control over that, having the H-1B1 visas, something that you're involved in that I would imagine has to start at the federal level, and they would have to kind of give the authority to governors to somehow exercise it or utilize it for their state. How does that play out? That's quite interesting.
I think there's a movement. I'm in the executive committee for the National Governors Association, and I'm policy chair for the Republican Governors Association. So there seems to be a bipartisan effort to say we need immigration reform in the U.S. It just makes common sense to meet the needs of Americans. If we need more workforce, to know who they are, make sure they're contributing to society. We're attracting the best and brightest. We've got like the NFL's #1 draft pick. I mean, everybody wants to come to America, and we're not utilizing it. So let's pick the best and brightest minds, and let's use them in technology, and that's going to contribute to society, and they're contributing to our system. But just opening up the borders and letting people to have free medical care and all of and we have no idea if they're who they are, and we know that we've got terrorists coming in. It makes no sense. And so again, people try to conflate those two issues. I think we need to make sure that we separate those and we get a good policy done to support the needs of American manufacturing and American farmers.
Yeah, I mean, the security here, you mentioned fentanyl deaths and communities destroyed. I mean, it's hard to talk to a governor and they don't reference that, no matter what color the state is. And every passing day, we're not doing something about it. The country's hurting, families are hurting. Let's move on to energy. You referenced that a little bit earlier. Of course, Oklahoma's a great energy state. Why don't you give us some of the stats on that, and tell us about how the federal policy, you referenced this just a little bit earlier, is really undermining or not allowing, the full realization of what the U.S. writ large, but particularly your state, could be doing to advance our energy interests, and actually, I think, would have a geopolitical impact as well. We should talk about Russia and Ukraine as a follow-on to that.
Yeah. Well, first off, it's. I think the American people want energy security. They want to have a reliable energy grid. When we flip the light switches on and when we turn on our heaters in the wintertime, we want to make sure that's working, right? And Oklahoma does it very well. We're number 6 in oil production in the country, number 5 in natural gas production. But we're believing more of everything. And this blows people's minds sometimes, but we're number 3 in wind energy production, right? We have some of the cleanest water, cleanest air in the country. 50% of our energy comes from renewables in Oklahoma. And we're also the pipeline capital of the world. So Cushing, Oklahoma is the largest commercial oil reserve in the country with 100 million barrels. So what is President Biden administration doing? They are stopping LNG exports and new LNG projects. Well, Oklahoma, we take the natural gas that we produce and we ship it on pipelines down to the Gulf Coast that gets turned into LNG and then sent to our allies in Europe, okay? Because they need reliable energy as well. And so what happens is we're driving them to the arms of people that don't like us very much when we're not supplying our allies and our friends with the security that they need. It makes no sense from a State Department perspective, but also we're limiting also the assets that we have in the U.S. Again, it just makes no sense whatsoever, them just refusing to do LNG exports and pausing all these projects.
It's actually the sort of facts and details, Governor, you just provided that the folks in Washington, I'll play the outside the Beltway game here for a second, don't want to hear, because, I mean, the fact that you're number 3 in renewables, if I heard you correctly, totally runs counter to the narrative that you're either oil and gas or you're for clean energy, but that you can't, have some sort of balance between the two. The geopolitical points you make, Governor, I think are spot on. That's where the common sense of middle America sometimes gets lost inside the Beltway here, where I'm coming to you from, because you look at Russia right now, where it's reconstituted its force in the absence of a supplemental coming out of the Congress where the United States would give weapons to Ukraine, Russia will win. And the reason why Russia can reconstitute its military governor is really a function of their oil and gas revenue. Now, some things we were not going to be able to deal with through the good offices of Oklahoma, right? China's buying up all their oil and gas. But generally, you would be advancing our allied interests, like you say, if we're able to get that LNG out there. But it's a really interesting story, the fact that you could be, governor of a red state and still have those stats. Does that surprise people when you talk about clean energy? Do your fellow governors, they kind of give you are they shocked, or they don't want to hear it because it, goes away from the normal talking points?
Yeah, they are shocked by that. And because of all that, it has led to Google, for example, has their largest data center located in Oklahoma. They love buying our cheap, affordable, clean energy. But I even have some of my blue state colleagues that just call me and just say, hey, can you get me in touch with a pipeline company? We don't understand why our grid is unreliable. And I'm like, well, because you're not allowing permitting to be done. And we have the resources to meet the needs of Americans. But think about this for a second. You've got a politician for a political agenda and reasoning is making it more expensive for Mr. and Mrs. Jones to heat their home, to fill up their gas tank. Because last time I checked, we all have to take our kids to piano lessons and soccer practice and school, and we have to heat our homes and our businesses. Why would we purposely make stuff cost more for the American people? I mean, it just makes no sense.
Well, Washington confounds logic. I think that's pretty clear. Although we're going to have a very powerful position, has recently been filled by a colleague of yours, Congressman Tom Cole, is now the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives, which is, I would think, a very consequential moment for Oklahoma's delegation. One of the things he's going to be dealing with, that is Chairman Cole and members in the House of Representatives, to figure out what they're going to do on Ukraine aid, I referenced a moment ago, as well as aid to Israel. Give me your take, Governor, on how you look at Ukraine and their plight in defending freedom and countering Russian aggression. I had a chance to be out there a couple of weeks ago, and as I referenced, I don't see them succeeding without U.S. support.
Yeah. Well, first off, we spend, on the budget. I'd like to talk about that for a second, because our revenue last year was about $4.4 trillion. So, there's a lot of good things we should do, but I think we have to have a cap on spending. We cannot continue deficit spending. So in other words, we're spending $6.1 trillion when we only make 4.4. That's a problem. And our debt right now, we're only servicing interest only. I come from the mortgage business. And no matter how small my principal amount is on my 30-year fixed mortgage, I have the confidence that in 30 years, I'm going to have my house paid off, right? Well, we're doing interest only. That means we're not paying our debt off. It's interest only. And we're spending now 25% of our income on interest. And that is more than the national debt. That's more than the national defense budget, right? Is interest only. Americans need to understand that. But all that being said, we have to stand with our allies. We have to stand up to bullies. This is an opportunity that we get to punch back on a bully, and we need to not put American soldiers in harm's way, but we just need to support our friends and allies around the world. Governor Abbott and I just got back. We went to Israel right after, 30 days after the October 7th terrorist attacks. And we're able to get there. We have to stand up with Israel. Now we're seeing Iran come in and launch all the cruise missiles and all the drone attacks. It's a different world right now with leadership in Washington that's not maybe as forceful and as strong as they should be.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is an era of lost deterrence, and deterrence is made up of, one, what your capability is, the strength of your military, but also the commitment and voice of that leader, and whether or not the leader's word is being respected. And infamously, I should say, President Biden, when asked prior to Iran launching those ballistic cruise missiles and drones on Israel, what's his message to Iran was, and he said, don't. And then within 24 hours, they did. And in some respects, President Biden's whole foreign policy and national security legacy will be about things he said versus what actually happened. I couldn't agree with you more on allies. And I think, you started the response, Governor, talking about the budget, which I think is exactly right. And you're a business person. You know what a good deal is. I mean, the Ukrainians, those guys are going to do the fight. And we're going to spend pennies on the dollar compared to what we would have to pay to deal with Vladimir Putin invading a NATO country. So, they're fighting for their freedom. That's what they're doing. But it would absolutely accrue to our benefit where, President Trump's national security strategy called Russia, an enemy, an adversary right after China. Let's go back to Israel. It's amazing you went there with Governor Abbott. In your mind, what is support like in Middle America, right, in Oklahoma? Because we hear a lot of noise from the coast on college campuses, certain corridors, and in the Congress of this unbelievable hate towards Israel. It's anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, supporting Hamas. I mean, this mindset that has emerged post-October 7th that gets a lot of attention in the media. Is there any of that in Oklahoma?
Well, categorically, I mean, I could say absolutely not. Oklahomans stand with Israel. We support Israel. Go look at my New York Post article that I just got interviewed. And basically, I just asked the Jewish community, you guys need to move to Oklahoma. If you're in New York and the anti-Semitism, the attacks, the things that are happening, feeling unsafe, we just approved the first ever religious charter school. And so I was inviting the community to come set up Hebrew schools. We've got, Christian charter schools. The Catholics are setting up a Catholic charter school in the state of Oklahoma. It's being sued, and it'll go back to the Supreme Court. But basically what I'm saying is we believe in religious liberties. And I think that's the foundation of our country. And so we're so supportive of our greatest ally in the Middle East, which is Israel. The other thing, when I went over there, I met with Netanyahu, I met with President Herzog, and basically what I wanted to come back and share with Oklahomans, and Abbott was sharing with Texans, is you hear about this Iron Dome, right? And so that is the technology that if there's missiles launched, that it intercepts them and protects the public. However, what we don't understand really is, think about this for a second. Their new paradigm in Israel, for the last 15 years, they've had rockets launched at them. Can you imagine in Oklahoma and Texas, what would we do if Mexico was just launching rockets, thousands of them, at our country? We would go clean house. Why would we expect anything different from Israel? If Hamas, and they're basically a terrorist organization, they're a military without any morals, they're highly trained, highly funded by Iran, and that's another issue. Why are we funding Iran and allowing and lifting sanctions to make them rich so they could come and attack us? We're not very smart in Washington, D.C., right? And so these policies make no sense to the American people when you really understand them. But we need to unleash and allow Israel to get rid of terrorists. If we don't do it there, it's going to go to Europe. It's going to come to the U.S. And we need to fight terrorists. And so that's why Oklahomans stand so strongly with our allies, Israel.
Common sense, Governor. Here at the Reagan Institute, we like governors coming into Washington and talking their approach to foreign policy and geopolitics. Governor Reagan came into the presidency, had his own view in terms of what should happen with the Soviet Union and whether or not we should just allow it to exist or challenge it. And of course, his unorthodox approach led to the end of the Cold War. I think the approach you're taking is one certainly would be embraced by not just Bibi Netanyahu, but the people of Israel that absolutely wanted to defend themselves and not be told after they suffer an attack of over 300 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones. Hey, call it a win and don't respond. I mean, it's crazy. Can you imagine, Governor, if you had to tell that to your citizens? Hey, we defended an attack from Mexico. Call it a win.
Yeah. Think about that for a second. If Mexico attack and we lose a life, that we're going to go, oh, all right. we're even. Go, no big deal. It's so again,
Well, I love the common sense there, Governor, and I couldn't agree with you more. Maybe all of Washington lacks common sense, but at least what we're coming to you today makes a lot of sense to us. Let's move to our lightning round, Governor. Great conversation spanning energy policy, foreign policy, border security, but now we check your chops in terms of Reagan enthusiasts. You mentioned before you're enjoying listening to Reagan's radio addresses. Share with us for the lightning round your favorite Reagan speech, book, or quote. What do you got?
Well, first off, I love his radio addresses. You can get them on, you can download them and listen to them. They're fantastic. But the quotes I often say is, I think it's the 9 most frightening words in the English language is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So that's there's no institution more vital to our nation's survival than the American family. Here, the seeds of personal character are planted, the roots of public virtue first nourished through love and instruction, discipline, guidance, and example. We learn from our mothers and our fathers these values that will shape our private lives and our public and citizenship. So again, that's why I talk a lot about fathers. We need family values. We need dads in the homes. We need the moms and the dads. And for us to pretend that you're not going to put your own values in your children, your own faith practices, I mean, it's just crazy. What are the first thing the communists try to do is they try to rip religion and rip faith and rip God out of society. That's not American values. And so again, I'm just super passionate about religious liberties, and we don't have to agree on our faith, but we can agree that we have the right to give our to put our faith in our children.
That's great. It's not freedom from religion; it's freedom of religion. And I think you rightfully called that out in your Reagan lightning round. Governor Stitt, thank you so much for being on the show.
Man, it's my honor, and I love visiting the Reagan Institute. If you haven't got a chance to stop by there in D.C., it is worth your time. And Roger, you do such a great job with your staff, and so I'll come back.
Well, we want to have you and appreciate that endorsement. Take care.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Reaganism. New episodes premiere weekly every Monday on YouTube and all podcast streaming platforms. If you like this episode, be sure to let us know and share with a friend.